So, hello everyone. Welcome back to our RBS Innovation Bites series. My name is Valentino Megale, and as you know, every month we had the opportunity to meet professionals that you would like to know. Professionals active in a variety of fields that actually mirror the great variety of masters that we are covering with the Rome Business School. This is an activity that we do to all our alumni, and you are so many from literally every corner in the world. So today, the episode that we are going to cover is entitled Charting Europe's Tech Future, Innovation, Funding, and Policy for the Next Digital Era. And to talk about this very specific intersection of innovation, funding, and also regulation, which is at the same time a little bit of the very specific characteristic of the European ecosystem, we and I have the great honor and pleasure to have on our stage Michael Barngrover, who is the managing director of XR4Europe, which is a pan-European association connecting and supporting organizations working with immersive and virtual world technologies. So Michael is the right person to talk about this topic because he's constantly working at the intersection of policy, digital, innovation, industry, and it's a great reference point for institutions, startups, and researchers who wants to navigate also the instruments of the European Commission and the funding strategies and best practices. So I'm welcoming Michael on our digital stage, and here we are. All right, and here we are.
Hello.
Michael,
Yes.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Valentino. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, my pleasure to collaborate also with you in so many different opportunities, no, in many occasions. And now I'm very happy to uh, let our students benefit from your expertise. And I'm going to start as usually with one first question about this topic. Well, talking about Europe right now, Europe has a very distinct approach, I would say, on innovation, which became our, I would say, representing value-driven attitudes, not to emerging technologies. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, such a disruptive and fundamental technology today, when it comes also to extended reality, what is your personal also and professional consideration about the very specific approach of Europe when it comes also to topics such as competitiveness? So how do you feel the approach of Europe today?
Yeah, there's a lot that's in that question. I mean, I'll tackle it from maybe the end of that question first, and then I may come back to the earlier parts of it and ask for a restatement. But I feel like from a competitive perspective, this recent, I say recent, the last couple of years at least, this great emphasis on a human-centered design and data privacy by design, and more broadly what we call what we attribute as ethics into the very product and the service being developed in these spaces. It's really essential for European competitiveness because it's very hard to see how Europe can compete on many other metrics alone, on cost or quality, or the vertical integration of a hardware product service. So Europe can compete on these dimensions, but it's not in a dominant position. I think it's fair to say on any of those dimensions. It simply has some elements that it's not completely not competitive in those ways. But this design, the user experience focus, that is something that is not dominated by some other region in the world. This is kind of up for grabs a little bit.
Mhm.
And Europe, I almost feel like has a first mover advantage in this space, because it's really putting it front and center that this is what it expects, what it requires. Um, So in terms of global competitiveness and even local competitiveness, this is really a key element that differentiates and might for some consumers or for some client profiles, enterprise client profiles would be the characteristic on which a purchasing decision hangs
Mhm.
or changes. So I think it's essential. That's the last question. Is what do I? It's essential to the competitiveness that Europe be seen. European products and services created within Europe and taken abroad or kept internally, be seen as embodying and embedding these values innately, unavoidably as a requirement. But to be honest, the devil's in the details. And so this is also what's interesting about the challenges between exporting and not exporting. You know, what is Europe? You ask an Italian this question, you're going to get a very different answer, probably depending on who in Italy you ask, from someone in Slovenia,
Mhm.
someone in Austria, someone in Switzerland, and France. And that makes sense. Everyone here lives within Europe, has opinions, has competing visions of what that is. But you go outside of Europe, then what is Europe? What is a European value? That becomes a much simpler thing to distill.
Mhm.
And in some ways, I think that the value emphasis is most effective, is certainly the most is the simplest, is when it's taken into foreign markets. And that's why I think the benefit to
Mhm.
the competitive advantage is in foreign markets. Maybe within the single market, this is
Yeah.
not necessarily something that's really that much of a competitive advantage, or it's a diminished because it invites all these questions as to, well, which European said this? Is that European like my vision of a European? But you take it outside, and I think it has more of a clear communicable, marketing benefit and product differentiation benefit.
Got it. So you say that from abroad, it's a little bit easier to identify what Europe is than from the inside. Like from the outside, the vision is a little bit clearer. So it's also the value-driven take of Europe becomes a soft power, no, at the same
Yeah,
time. No, a soft
yeah.
power that we need to build and develop for sure. This is a conversation that we had some times ago also about it. Absolutely. And well, moving also to the second question. Well, imagine that we have some early stage founders, innovators, startuppers in Europe, but also sometimes from abroad that wants to jump in Europe. Um, you are so well connected, not with so many different organizations, so many different companies, really across many countries. I'm in Poland right now these days,
Mhm.
and I know that you are also so well connected with Europe, with the Polish ecosystem of innovation and also XR4 Awards. So you're really touching so many different um, extremes, no, of takes in Europe. So for a startup, for a founder, what is the what are some best practices, no, to start accessing the European funding opportunities such as Horizon Europe, AC, and if such a company, if such a small organizations want to start this funding process, what makes a proposal stand out today? How it
Mhm.
can be, I would say, competitive and relevant?
Well, we're in XR for Europe is one of the partners in a project called Be Our Health Champions, and that's a
Yeah.
project that's supporting five SMEs,
Hmm.
five SMEs, and of course a small enterprise, five small enterprise that are bringing in immersive technologies into the healthcare space, broadly speaking. Some of it is surgical support. Some of that is clinical therapies, and one of them is from Romania, and is a hardware to help the visually impaired navigate the world through some haptic feedbacks. And that one stands out to me recently because we recently we had an online interview for that project, and was describing to me how they've raised 20 million euro effectively in Romania which had not been done in Romania before, is what they said.
Mhm.
These are things that I don't know the details of it to be able to put that into context, but that's what they said.
Yeah.
And that of course it was harder to raise in Romania, but that it wasn't impossible. It was just a matter of persistence, having the right product, being able to, to be able to succeed in selling that message and that
Mhm.
potential. And that stood out to me because there's often a lot of focus on the European funding, the EU level funding. But in my experience, a lot of the greater amounts of funding are done at the local level or at the
Totally.
national level.
Mhm.
And they
Mhm.
tend to be a little bit more accessible because of issues of language, and of course it's just different. You're competing in your neighborhood versus competing
Yeah.
with strangers, or dealing with institutions that are evaluating strangers the same. So that's to say that it advantages some and it disadvantages others for sure. But if we're looking at the EU funding, the the headline programs that particularly we really are aware of that are the most beneficial maybe uh, are like Horizon Europe. But Horizon Europe is research focused, research and development focused. It does
Mhm. Mhm.
fund SMEs, and it can fund startups if one of the small enterprise is fitting the profile of a startup, being growth oriented and rapid development. But but these projects, generally speaking, there are always exceptions, but most of these projects are consortia driven. So there's lots of partners and lots of stakeholders, and the startup is going to be a small player in that because they're not carrying the weight of the research. In most cases, there's an example of the XR to Industry project, which is built
Okay.
around a French mixed reality headset, which was some years ago for consumer, and now it's for enterprise focus. It is
Mhm.
absolutely they are a startup. They're trying to hit that point where they can bring a novel, I mean, relatively novel product to the industry, to the market.
Market.
And but these horizon projects are like 3 years. There's reporting, there's internal
Yeah.
reporting, and then there's external reporting. There's guidance, there's requests, because effectively the client for that project is the European Commission. So it's not the same thing as an investment.
Mhm.
It's a project. You're being paid to do some work. Now you told them the
Yeah.
work you
Yeah.
want to do. So that's why in some of the projects where I don't want to name which project specifically in case this is sensitive, but in some projects that
Mhm.
we've been in where there is cascade funding or there is support specifically for SMEs and startups, the advice that some of the lead project partners who are, active in this space have given to them is don't pursue EU funding. It's really not, you pursue private funding. You do not go after public funding. But that's for a startup. For
Mhm.
a small enterprise that is not looking for exponential growth in as quickly
Yeah.
as they can, then this funding, that's a whole different story. Then the funding becomes, is it good funding? One of the
Mhm.
challenges that a lot of these programs have, Digital Europe has this, but also XR or Horizon Europe, they don't fund commercial entities typically 100%. So
Mhm.
Digital Europe,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
usually 50% kind of for everybody. But even in
Mhm.
Horizon Europe, which is 100% funded for research institutions or nonprofits, but for commercial entities, it may be 70% or 80% or less. It depends on the specifics of the call. And the thinking is, well, we're giving you some of this money so that you can make a product you're going to go sell. And in some
Mhm.
ways, you're the most attractive applicant partner in this because you already have something. You've already
Yeah.
demonstrated impact with the product. So
Mhm.
we don't want to pay you to make a product that has no market value, and we don't want to give you money if you have never done this before. So they're looking for this sweet spot, someone who's in the space, already is market active, and this is just like subsidy for something that
Mhm.
they want to do already with their product, and they're already going to invest themselves into developing their product or their service, and then this extra money from the commission is just extra money. It's just fuel.
Yeah.
So On paper, that sounds great. But in practice, that has been a barrier for quite a lot of people. However, what I would say, it's a barrier because usually the small enterprise that apply for these, who follow public funding calls and know the
Mhm.
consortium relation, because you need to have a relationship with whoever's leading the consortium,
Sure, exactly.
which is
Yeah.
usually a big university or research institution. Um, these are SMEs whose revenue is derived from publicly funded projects. They are
Mhm,
not
mhm.
SMEs who are generating commercial sales of a product or service out in the market. You know, with those companies
Mhm.
who do that, this 50% is exactly as it's intended. It's just an extra bit of subsidy to do something that they are already planning in their roadmap to do.
Mhm,
But a
mhm.
lot of times people will fall into the trap of proposing something new that doesn't have a market justification, and then this 50% funding is not enough. Then the 50% they're obliged to
Yes.
supply themselves becomes really um, unpalatable. So that's to say. So let me put that all kind of in a nutshell. That's to say that there is an opportunity for small enterprise or medium enterprise who are commercially active developing these products. Then this is meant for you. The challenge
Mhm,
is
mhm.
that the problem today is that it's often going to entities who are focused on public
Yeah.
grant opportunities, and this is where that 50% becomes this problem. It's not enough for them, but they're following it, and then the commercially
Mhm,
active ones are not as aware of these opportunities and are
mhm,
not following it, and so they miss this opportunity to get something that's designed for them. So
mhm.
what makes so how can they overcome that? It's, of course, you can follow the calls. We and other groups will disseminate them, but that's if you already knew
Yeah.
how to do that, you'd be doing it. Have a relationship with research institutions in your home market as much as possible, right? If that's the CNR, if you're in Italy, for example,
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
Politecnico di Milano,
Mhm,
these types of entities that are very active in this space, have good relationships with them if you can. Then
mhm.
you're on their radar when they're looking to put together as a coordinator a proposal.
Yeah.
Then they
Absolutely.
know, hey, you have something very valuable, and and we have a vision for how it supports its proposal. That's the best way to do that, and that's also what helps make um, a consortium, a proposal stand out. Have
Mm,
You have something that isn't completely new. It's in the market.
mm.
You clearly demonstrated that what you're doing and what you're making and selling has value because you're selling it. People are paying for it.
Exactly.
That 100% is a critical differentiator in a lot of proposals, which a lot of proposals, usually the unsuccessful ones particularly, just don't. They're too aspirational. They're too theoretical. So even with the
Mm,
SMEs, they're theorizing that I'm going to make this thing in these 3 years, and then it's going to have this incredible impact on the market and the world. But
yeah.
anytime a project has these types of these companies that they clearly know how to create impact in the market because they're active in it, then it's much easier to believe that through this project, you're going to be able to enhance them to have a wider impact, a bigger impact, or something like this. It's and the project is guaranteed an impact because they're in it.
Mhm. That's crystal clear, Michael, and it mirrors also what we did with our company. So we actually built relationship with educational and I would say research institutions from the north to the south. Now we are having a very good collaboration with the University of Tuscia in Lazio, which is also very active at the European level. And that's correct. It's a connection. It's a networking first, and then of course building of value at a European wide level. Thanks a lot for bringing so many actionable details. I'm sure that will be extremely useful for our students and for many potential entrepreneurs and companies. And I have a final question. Well, when it comes to Europe, our students coming also in Europe, sometimes from South America, Middle East, from Asia, from US also, they see AI Act, they see, of course, the GDPR.
Hmm.
They get in touch, or maybe they read about the Virtual Worlds Initiative, all of the investments right now, also, of course, in AI. AI factories, semiconductor investment. So, what do you think? Which recent European Commission actions do you believe will have the most relevant impact in the next 3 to 5 years at the end? And why do you think these are very important to establish or to build the competitiveness also Europe?
Yeah, it's the kind of the intuitive answer, the
Mm,
one that seems obvious, is the AI Act, because right now AI is the one that right, it's driving everything. So even something small, if it's related to, if it's impacting AI, a small regulation, but it impacts AI, then in theory it's going to be affecting billions, if not trillions, of
mm,
euro of investments going around. But the AI Act is it's still a good answer. It's still a good answer, but I would actually say something like the Digital Markets Act is
okay.
probably more is as good an answer, and it's where I actually kind of shade to. But in both cases, it's a question of finalization and enforcement. And right now, the geopolitical situation is meaning that those two regulatory acts are under pressure. It does not mean that they're going to change, but it does mean that it's not just a simple as simple as any regulation is
No,
to
no,
finalize.
exactly, exactly.
It's not as simple as it normally is. It does carry now some real economic impact in unintended and unexpected ways. You pass the Digital Market Act, you enforce or try to enforce Apple or Meta or these companies to open up a marketplace, for example, or change the way they run it.
Mhm,
And there's a chance you have an issue for the wine sector or the cheese sector. That's what makes this much more difficult. But if these can come through in something close to their ideal shape and scope and format, at least what the writers were intending when they undertook this,
mhm,
then they will open up, as we said, really a tremendous opportunity for Europe to leverage this value and ethics and human-centric design um, proposition, to really leverage that, because these are where these would be broken. These would be running into a wall. If you
yeah,
cannot influence or regulate the market, if the market is run through proprietary and a vertically integrated business model, then these are things that don't exist outside the context of the sole operator,
mm,
which is the company. Um, and right, usually when I think if anything, Meta, and to a lesser extent, certainly Apple and Amazon and Google,
yeah,
but these companies, these big tech companies, have been the source of motivation for these acts, unmistakably. Maybe AI Act is a little broader, but definitely the Digital Markets Act. They're the reason why. So that
mhm,
they are the. You don't want to say they're the opponent of it, but for lack of a better word, they are the target of the Digital Market Act. They are the reason for its existence. And if that act comes through, then like I said, it changes how those markets act, at least in Europe, and then the belief is beyond
mhm,
eventually. And it creates such new opportunity for SMEs and for new innovative products in Europe, because that has been part of the issue, is that you really do need to play by these rules,
yeah,
and these rules are set by something that is external and foreign,
mhm,
and it makes it difficult to leverage in the innate human value, design value or technical human resource value here in Europe. It makes it difficult to leverage that because you're taking all of that and you're still packaging it into a foreign wrapper because it's
mhm,
being sold at a foreign marketplace or store. And that's I'm keeping my fingers crossed that those acts come through, because I know companies and I know content creators and service providers who would benefit tremendously if that opened up today. If that opened up today, the
yeah,
AI Act still, though, probably for many people is going to be that one, just because right now that is the topic of this. It's hard to say era, because what doesn't an era include like COVID 4 years ago, which no one talks about much anymore. Like it's hard to say this is the topic of the era, because it seems like eras are now not even 5 years long almost.
No, even shorter, even shorter.
But definitely it's the topic of yesterday, today, and we envision tomorrow.
Mm,
And so that act as well will be very impactful if it comes through whole, as again, as intended, knowing that there was a lot of criticism about the writing of it, and
of course, of course.
for sure, especially for XR and VR, it was not aligned with XR and virtual worlds.
Hmm.
The language was not aligned in the sense. So you mentioned the virtual world initiative
Yeah.
of the European Commission, the strategic initiative, which is leading to this partnership, which is a private-public research funding initiative. And it's to say that, so you have this big strategy going on with really probably hundreds of millions of euro, because already, there's a report that we released it's public on our website, that showed that in Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, it was something like 660 million euro was invested in projects that either featured and focused on or just included significantly XR. And now this broadly more expanded to be called virtual worlds, and to take a lot of things that are not user experience driven, but like factory and corporate digitalization.
Yeah.
Then the expectation is, yeah, it's going to be another 400-500 million euro over the next work package. That is, so it's just to say again that the AI Act was developed, but in its own sphere, while this other thing was being developed as well, and there still needs to be time to align them, because they're not they're not aligned ideally. But so yeah, I'm sorry I gave you two answers, but I
No,
think
no, no. It's no, no, no. It's extremely precious, Michael, because once again, we have so many students at the Rome Business School. They are coming from so many different countries, and especially at the Rome Business School, it's crystal clear that there is not only Europe in the world. When it comes to the market, there are so many different perspectives around the world, and we are always enriched by the doubts and the perspectives on students from every corner in the world. And when they come in Europe, maybe it's not immediately clear why all of this regulation, why all of these acts are relevant, to build a technology that is more responsible and more also aligned, with the social benefits. And
Mhm.
regarding this, I think you provided so many numbers, actionable information, perspective, and this is going to be very useful for the students. Imagine that you are meeting some of our students coming from far, far away from Europe, and what would you say to, I don't say convince, but to support his or her idea to maybe start a business in Europe? What would you say in a very short sentence or very few sentences?
uh, where would you rather live and work?
Mm,
And I think Europe, for me, is that answer. Where it sounds condescending, because because the world's a big place and people can do anything they want to do in many places. But for me, what stands out about Europe is that, and of course, I'm working in a nonprofit. So take that, everybody takes that with a grain of salt. And I'm working in a nonprofit, and it's not the first time. In Europe, I feel like it's a place where you can develop a business, you can develop a product or a service that does not have to serve everyone. It does not have to be a monopoly to be
mm,
successful and to be valued.
of
And I think I don't see that in other places. At least I don't see that in North America. North America is driven, and that's why the investment is, it's driven to establish monopoly,
Mhm.
and to hold on to that monopoly as long as possible before then inevitably, an authority breaks it up after some decades. But by that time, the founders and the investors have reaped the benefits,
Mhm.
financial
Mhm.
benefits of monopoly. And of course, there are benefits to society, but usually by the time it becomes monopoly, those benefits very quickly recede.
Yeah.
And Europe is not a monopoly-driven culture or market.
Mhm.
And I think that's, for some people, they see that as a flaw. Like they see that you cannot hyperscale to become the single dominant force across 27 member states.
Mhm.
But then others can see that as a feature of it's not what we want here. We want to have choice. So that would be the answer. But if there's one thing, if I can say one additional thing, just while I'm here, because you mentioned something about regulation just a moment ago, and I want to share something that I learned in it was an MBA program at NYU. I was actually doing a master's, so not an MBA, but I had to do a thesis
Yeah.
in my university of Boğaziçi in Istanbul, and I was at NYU, and the instructor was talking about the history of financial systems, financial institutions and systems. And he said something that I've always remembered when the topic of regulation, and in Europe they said, U.S. innovates, Europe regulates,
Mm.
and it always presents them as a opposites.
Mhm. Mhm.
But for him, innovation in the financial systems was always driven by regulation.
Hmm.
A regulation comes, it inherently is meant to reestablish the acceptable parameters of some business or some market or operation. And who is best positioned to quickly and effectively innovate to that new condition? It's supposed to be startups and small enterprise. So
Hmm.
regulation leads to innovation. That they're not opposites, and they're not
It's not
opposed
the
to.
enemy. Yeah.
And that came to me from a professor at NYU, so an American guy who. So I want to encourage everyone, every student, don't fall into this trap of seeing regulation as the enemy, and you need to escape regulation.
Hmm.
Regulation is there, right, to provide something that you can make a decision about. If you have the best idea, well, regulation is where your idea is going to best fit and adapt to that, to that regulatory environment. And if you follow regulation, you can anticipate. And that's the advantage of large enterprise and big tech. They're
Mhm.
anticipating sometimes years in advance how a regulation is going to form. So it's not very fair. But again, it does not mean that they can adapt very easily. They're usually trying to stop the regulation from really going much further. So that's one last thing I think is always I'm excited to push back on the anti-regulation
No, that's true.
stance in business.
That's true. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And these are definitely topics that are emerging in so many cases. These are doubts that are emerging in many cases. And that's great also having your perspective on that. Michael, that was a really great discussion. I can't wait to share also this with our students. Before closing, I also want to remember to all our students that, well, they can subscribe to our newsletter, so they are going to be updated also about these episodes and about any upcoming events and initiatives. So once again, Michael, thanks again for for being here, for sharing your perspective. And well, I definitely invite all of our students to follow Michael on LinkedIn, to follow and visit also the website of XR4Europe, where they can find also resources, of course.
Mhm.
And well, thanks again. And to all, see you the next time.
Yeah, thank you
Thanks a
very
lot.
much, everyone.
Thank you.